In today's video, we're going to be building this 4-drawer, or if you want to call it a 3.5 drawer nightstand. Each one is on roller glides, which is cost saving because this is going to be somewhat of a budget build. So stick around to the end of the video to make sure that you see the breakdown of how I spent about $220 on this whole build. All right, guys, so let's dig in deeper, start to build it. There's a lot of woodworking information, so stick around. Okay, everybody, so I'm going to get started on this build like every other build that involves a cabinet or a carcass of some sort, bookcase, cabinet, a vanity, anything like that. We're going to break down the sheet of plywood, and the best way for me to do that is with my sliding table saw. Now, you don't need a sliding table saw to do this. You could use a regular table saw, or you could start it off with a track saw. That does help make breaking the sheet down a lot easier than handling the 4x8. Now, you definitely want to make sure that when you're cutting down the sheet of plywood that you're maximizing it so that you're not wasting too much material. So you definitely want to cut your larger pieces first. If you're doing this a paint grade, then you don't have to worry so much about the grain direction on the veneer. But if you're doing a stain grade finish that's going to have a clear coat over it, then you definitely want to pay attention to which way the grain is running. And in this case, you would have to make the grain run vertical from top to bottom because it's just a much nicer look. This is going to be paint grade, so I'm not worried about that, but I am maximizing my sheet to the fullest amount, and I'm cutting the sides first, then the top, bottom, and then the stretchers for the back. It's also very important to use a stop block or some sort of a guide so that you can make all the pieces the same size when you're cutting them, so everything is square. And you can see me using my parallel jig that I made for the sliding table saw. That helps me to rip thin strips down, such as these stretchers for the carcass of this build. It keeps your hands away from the blade. It's a hands-free operation, and you can rip strips down to less than a quarter of an inch if you need to. Okay, so a really quick trick here. I have it in just a dry fit mock-up. And so what I'm going to do is, because I'm using edge banding on the front of this, and this is going to be kind of like a modern style nightstand with the drawers inset, so we're not doing a face frame here. So what I'm going to do is edge band just the actual sides of the plywood of the carcass itself. So a little trick is just to use a black Sharpie and just draw a line on the faces that you're going to put the edge banding on. And what that'll do is, once you take this apart and break it down to do the edge banding, you won't have to worry about what faces you're actually going to put the edge banding on. You'll see the black mark and you won't get it wrong. I've also taken the time to just pencil out some lines on the stretchers of the carcass there where I'm going to put the pocket holes for the pocket screws when I join this together. The bottom I'm going to join with dominoes, and that's just going to help me line it up better. You could do it with pocket screws. You don't need to do it with dominoes. So I'm just going to use glue dominoes there and pocket screws and glue on the stretchers. Now for the sides and the top and bottom, and also the drawer fronts, I'm going to be using an iron-on edge banding. All you have to do is iron it on. It activates the glue, press it on, and then trim the edges. Now to trim it, I'm going to use this edging tool, which is really cheap. I'll link it in the description, but a straight razor works just as good. Then I take a file and just rough out those edges, and then I can hit it with a little bit of sandpaper, and it's perfectly smooth and looks like solid edge banding. Bought this drill in '92, still going strong. Thing's in great shape. I use the hell out of it. That makes it what, like 29 years old? All right. Let's drill these pocket holes out for all the stretchers. Now for alignment purposes and ease of assembly, I'm going to use the domino to join the sides to the bottom. Now you don't have to have a domino machine. You can also just do this with either regular screws in a butt joint fashion, or you can use the pocket screws as long as you hide those holes of the pockets from underneath.
Once I have the bottom and sides aligned with the dominoes and everything's glued up, I'll install some clamps on the front and back, and that'll hold it in place while the glue sets. Then I can move on to the top and install the stretchers with pocket screws. By attaching top stretchers, this gives you something to screw the solid top onto, while also helping square up the top of the cabinet.
Now I'm going to install the drawer glides first. So what I usually do is I label them so that I can put them all in one shot. So that'll be number 1, and then I'll use a spacer. That'll be number 2. And the only reason I do that is because they come together in a pack, and I don't want to mix and match drawer slides. Even though they're the same size, what happens is they're manufactured together at the same time per set. So if one is a little bit off and you try to mix it with another one, you know, that could cause a problem down the road sometimes. Maybe a little binding, maybe there's a defect in one of them and the other one is married to it. It makes it perfect. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have a combination square, because you have to set these back, not only the thickness of the drawer front if you're doing inset drawers, so you can take a piece of the scrap of the plywood that you're working with, and that's going to be your drawer front, and then you can butt it up against the back of there, but you still need, they recommend, a 1/16 of an inch behind that. So what I'm going to do is move that out of the way. I took my combination square and placed it up against my piece that's going to be the drawer front, and I added a 1/16 of an inch to the combination square. So now when I put this up against the front of the casing and I butt the drawer slide up against it, I know that's the exact spot that I need to be in when I screw it into the cabinet carcass. I'm going to be using a Vicks bit, and that's going to give me a perfectly centered hole on that drawer slide. Now, after the first one's installed, I can bring in track number 2. As you can see, I labeled it. I'm going to use a spacer block here, and what I did was, the drawers are going to be 7 inches high, so I gave myself a 1/2 inch of clearance to rest this track on there so that the drawers won't interfere with each other as they glide. Also have to do this again, butt it up against there.
Since I'm trying to keep this as a budget-friendly DIY build, when I'm building these drawer boxes, now that the drawer slides are installed, which, by the way, once you get the drawer slides, you have to read the instructions. It tells you how much clearance you need on each side to make your drawer boxes. So in this case, these require a 1/2 inch on each side, which means your drawer boxes have to be 1 inch smaller than the opening of the inside of your cabinet carcass. So now I'm going to cut all the parts of my drawers, and I'm going to assemble them with pocket screws. And glue, don't forget the glue. And here I'm cutting the groove for the bottoms of the drawers. Once I have all the grooves cut in the drawer boxes, I'm going to raise the blade up high enough to cut through the piece, and I'm going to take just the backs of the drawers and run them through against the rip fence. And that's going to cut off the extra piece that's behind the groove, and that's for to allow me to not have to encapsulate the drawer bottom, so I can just slide it into the groove and staple it in place. And if it needs to be replaced, it's not trapped in there. Once your drawer boxes are assembled, then you can go ahead and install the other part of the roller glides on the bottoms of the drawers. And then you can go ahead and do a quick test fit, make sure everything's good. Now I cut the bottoms out of 1/4 inch birch plywood, and they're just going to slide right into the grooves and get stapled to the backs. And that's the reason I cut the excess off the backs of the drawers, to slide them in and staple them to the back without encapsulating them. I made a solid top out of a couple of pieces of 1x4 poplar cut into strips and glued together, and you can see me clamp them up here. That's going to sit right on top of the carcass and get screwed into the top stretchers. Once that top's set overnight, I can cut it to size. And a quick pass of the router table gives me a nice profiled edge. And now it's time to install the drawer fronts, and they're just going to be screwed in through the back of the inside of the drawer. And I'm using washers to get a 1/16 of an inch spacing as a perfect reveal all the way around the drawer. So you'll see me placing the washers on the bottoms of the drawers, the tops, and the sides. Now, to make it easy to install that small top drawer, since I can't go in from the top unless I left the top off, the top is already screwed on, you can just use a little bit of CA glue and a little activator, stick it in place and give it a couple of seconds to hold. Then you can pull it out. It'll be secured on the drawer itself, and then you can actually remove the whole drawer to screw it in. To install the drawer pulls, I've put painter's tape in the center, or roughly in the center of each drawer, and now I'm just going to mark off the center from one side of the drawer, and then the center from top to bottom, and then I'm going to use an awl to make a pinhole, drill a hole, and then install the knobs.
Okay, so that was a really fun build. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot of good information about it. There's a lot of woodworking techniques in there and everything that I threw in that I think are great for any skill level that you are with carpentry and woodworking. So let's do a quick little breakdown of how I spent that $220 on all the materials here. Okay, so first thing was the carcass itself is made of 3/4 birch, and I bought a full sheet, which was a 3/4 4x8 sheet of the birch, and that cost $57. I got a little cheat sheet behind me, all right? So I'm going to go through the pricing and everything like that so that you can have an idea. Now, yours may cost a little more, may cost a little less, depending on the area that you're in. This is New York, so, you know, things are, you know, tend to be a little higher. So that 4x8 sheet was $57. I used a half sheet because the full sheet, the way it broke down, because I made the drawers out of the 3/4 inch material, the boxes also, I needed another half sheet. That was a 2x4, so 2 feet by 4 feet, not a full sheet. It was cut in half. Those tend to be half the price. So that was $29. The next thing was for the drawer bottoms. They are made of 1/4 inch birch plywood. I used one full sheet of that, and that cost me $37. The next thing on the list is for the solid top. I used 1x4s, 8 feet long, 3/4 inch poplar. Those were $16 a piece. I used 2 of them, cut them down, glued them together as you saw, and then sized it right, and that was $32 in total. So then we have the roller glides, which makes this help out with the budget build. Those were $6 a set at 16 inches. Then these knobs here, you don't have to go this fancy. You can just get plain old white knobs that were like $1 or $2 a piece in your big box stores. These happen to be $5, so there's 4 of them, and that's $20. The paint, I used paint from Home Depot, which was relatively cheap. I used the Bear paint, which is the satin acrylic enamel finish. 3 coats of that. I only needed a quart because I sprayed it. I didn't put that spraying of this in the video because it just takes up too much time. All right, so the edge banding was only about $6, and I didn't even use that much of it. I only edge banded the drawer fronts and around the drawer fronts and the front of the frameless part of the carcass. These are inset drawers. So I hope you saw how I spaced everything out. I hope that was easy for you to understand with the washers. You can use playing cards, you can use credit cards, things like that. Anything that has a consistent thickness, you just have to make sure that you place them in the right spot when you're securing the drawers. If you want to count the glue and screws and any kinds of brad nails or things like that, you know, the few bucks here and there. So my total was, with tax, was about $224 altogether on the bill. And because I bought almost pretty much everything except for the paint at Lowe's, you get a 5% if you use the Lowe's card. So there was some money taken off the bill there, so I think it came out to, I wrote it down, it was like $213.57. So that's what it took to build this whole thing, and I think the project came out great. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next build. Thank you for joining me in the shop, and I hope everybody has a good one.